When you're not employed and you are looking for a job and you have the added stress and pressure of I am essentially doing this work for free in hopes that I will eventually get a job so I can eventually pay my bills, that is an extra level of stress and anxiety on you that takes its toll as well. So I was almost burning myself out looking for a job. I'm busier than I was when I was fully employed because you're applying, taking the time to tweak CVs, and you're calling people and emailing, you're having coffee chats to network, you're doing interviews and you're prepping for interviews. It becomes a full-time job. So I looked at it and went, all right, well, my messaging sucks then. Like I'm clearly not explaining myself properly. If the result of my outreach is them thinking they don't want to hire me, I'm missing something there.
Nice.
I went in and I tweaked my CV a little bit to make sure I was highlighting exactly what I was doing, where I was a sales leader, where I wasn't a BDR leader, and trying to highlight some more of that. You need to start building your network, you start building your brand on LinkedIn, start connecting with folks. That was a huge aspect of how I was able to sort of accelerate my job hunt. I've posted a BDR role and gotten 600 applicants. I can't look at them all, like it's not physically possible. So how do you end up getting yourself at the top of that list?
Hey, welcome back to the SDR Hire podcast. I'm your host, Stefan, and if you're new to the channel, this is a place where you can learn from top producing salespeople what it's like working in tech sales, how do you break in, what do companies look for, how to get promoted, and how to succeed in tech sales. And today, I'm chatting with one of the first people that I've ever had on the podcast. His name is Chirs Cicconi. Since then, I've come to respect Chris very much. He's given me a helping hand on multiple occasions, and his leadership, both privately and publicly, has been second to none. And speaking of being public, over the past few months, Chris has went through a very intensive job hunt. He's been leading business development teams in the past in different companies for the past, let's say, 4 to 5 years. And he has used his presence on LinkedIn to showcase and document his job hunting journey until eventually he landed at Sherpa events. Hopefully I pronounced that properly. So Chris, welcome to the show, man.
Thank you so much. It is always a pleasure, especially when I show up and I get this wonderful intro like that. So yeah, you can have me on anytime if you're going to say wonderful things.
I mean, I enjoy consuming your content. I enjoy interacting with you, and I'm super happy to have you on again. You're the first person that I actually had a repeat
No way.
appearance on the show. So like, you are special. But why don't we just start with maybe you can reintroduce yourself to the audience. It's been a while. I think it's been like a year and a half or something like that. Yeah, time flies.
Crazy.
Yeah, exactly.
Crazy. Yeah, I would love to introduce myself. So, as Stefan mentioned, Chirs Cicconi, I have been in the sales world for like going on 15 years now. And, a big part of what I always do is my desire to pay things forward. It's my headline on LinkedIn. I truly believe in it because I studied kinesiology, I studied sciences, and I decided that wasn't going to be my career. How do I find, what I want to do? And I'll say lucky that, somebody, Denis, if you're listening to this by any chance, thank you, took a chance on me and gave me an opportunity to get into sales and, mentored me, coached me, taught me everything I could possibly want to know to be successful in this world. And so I was in the recruiting and the sales space for almost 10 years, moved to the SaaS world after that. Worked in the HR tech space for quite a bit of time, touched on a bit of AI, and now I'm at Sherpa in events. But for me, that paying it forward aspect has always been really important. Somebody gave me a chance. I want to give other folks an opportunity. And that's why I spent so much time in the business development side of things, because it was always amazing and very fulfilling to hire junior folks, give them, maybe that first or that second career opportunity, and then watch them grow, watch them develop into account executives or onward and upward. And so when I had this job search that I ended up in, I thought it was another opportunity to sort of pay it forward and give folks some of the learnings I guess I had during my job hunt, but also there was always around, getting laid off and looking for a job, a bit of an aspect of, maybe shame or feeling alone or feeling like you're the only one going through this. And I wanted to make sure that wasn't the case. And I wanted to be able to use a bit of my platform on LinkedIn to share that, you're not alone. You're not the only one. People are going through this. And, it could be somebody as junior as a brand new SDR or somebody like myself who's been, in sales leadership for the better part of 10 years. We can all struggle to find a job. We can all go through challenges. We can all have a hard time. So That's a very general introduction, but I really wanted to hone in on that piece because I think that sharing that, is as even just from engagement on LinkedIn and watching people reach out to me. I've had so many folks reach out and just say like, "Thank you for sharing this." It makes me feel like there are other people out there going through the same thing, or I feel the same way, or I'm having the same struggles, and that makes me feel good that I was able to just, share my story and have it be impactful.
And that is exactly why I wanted you to come on, to share that story, because, like you said, so many people struggle. There is no worse feeling than getting laid off, or whatever, like losing your job for whatever reason. And even if you decide to leave, it's a struggle to, like, oh no, especially being public about it, like, oh no, now I have to put the green banner, now I have to say, that I'm looking for a job. I have to, show some humility. Maybe, there's a component of embarrassment there. And so you sharing that, and like stoically uh, standing in front of people proud, and like just, finding ways to go through that, and finding opportunities, and building those opportunities for yourself, is just invaluable. So I really appreciate you for doing that, and that's like the majority of the reasons why I wanted to have you today. So maybe we can just go straight
Yeah.
into that process, and then we can go back to your career and stuff that I want to also talk about. But maybe can you give us just a little bit of context? So what that looked like from the perspective of your previous role, was it, and how did you end up looking for a new job?
Yeah, absolutely. So I was the the director of business development at Replicant. So it was contact center automation, basically leveraging AI to answer simple repetitive calls that you may get if you're calling your telecom provider, your energy provider, whatever the case may be. What ended up happening is the organization's kind of at this spot where it's sort of time to scale. They've moved a little bit out of the startup phase, and they decided that from a business development perspective, they wanted to house their whole team in one location. So it was a fully remote company previously, and they're starting to build out an SDR team, and they decided to open that office in Toronto. I don't live there. I have at the time 4-month-old, and I have a bunch of family in Montreal, and babysitters are free when they're grandparents, so it's lovely. So I wasn't ready to kind of uproot my life and make that move. So they informed me that they would still be going forward to hire essentially my replacement there. I was given about a month's notice, so I did have a little bit of a head start. They told me at the beginning of November. I had till the end of November, and then had a small severance package as well. I wasn't there that long. I was essentially there a year, so didn't have a lot of padding to go forward. So I needed to kind of jump on that horse and get that job search going as soon as possible.
There we go. All right. um I'm just thinking through and literally envisioning what that must have felt like. um but having that, uh how should I put it, like that perception of, all right, so it's action time, right? You don't basically have too long to dwell over what's transpired. You just wade straight into it. I remember you, one of your LinkedIn posts, where you said basically, this is the situation. Unfortunately, we had to, go our separate ways, and now I'm gonna start looking for a new gig, and I'm gonna be like very transparent about it on LinkedIn. I was like, wow, this is very impactful on so many levels. Um, so I'm not even sure where to where to begin that story. Like, how long did the job hunt last for?
Job hunt itself, I started the beginning of November. Essentially, when I got the news, I you know dotted my I's and crossed my T's with HR to make sure I understood what was going on from that side of things, and I pretty much jumped into it right away. That might have been the second week in November, and I think I accepted my offer the second week of January, so probably about 2 months worth. Might have been a little bit longer, give or take a few days here and there. Everything over that period of time turned into a little bit of a blur with with everything going on.
And how many opportunities were you able? So, like, what was your, let's start with that. What was your approach to getting to finding that new opportunity? And what I mean by that is, let's say a lot of SDR, I want to create a contrast between what somebody, of your uh, experience does maybe differently than, for example, somebody who's very green, an SDR who's just, finished finished their college, whatever, and is just like easy applying on LinkedIn or whatever. Like, what did that look like from your perspective?
So it's actually really funny because I had somebody reach out to me who local to me and business development rep, had about 9 months of experience and just found out he was getting laid off and reached out and we actually had a chat right before this call. So I got nice and warmed up to give some of that advice. But I will also paint a bit of a different picture and explain because there's two real components to this. And one side is about being proactive, and that's about my network. And that was such a huge aspect of being able to get a lot of interviews, connect with a lot of people, have a lot of coffee chats. It was the fact that, I've been active on LinkedIn. I've been not only posting, but engaging with folks, connecting with people like yourself. Yeah, I've built quite the network out so that when I did post, I was able to generate inbound leads essentially from saying I'm looking for a new job. So like that's the one thing. And I don't want to dwell too much on it because if you don't have it right now, it's not going to help you. And that was the biggest thing on the network side. People kept coming to me being like, "How are you leveraging your network? You're doing such a great job." Like, that's because I built it before I needed it. And so if you're not actively looking for a job today, or heck, even if you are, you need to start building your network. You need to start building, I would say, start building your brand on LinkedIn, start connecting with folks, start trying to post. That's a whole different conversation, a whole different topic. I have a free LinkedIn starter guide on my profile on LinkedIn, actually, if anybody wants to check it out. But start networking because that was a huge aspect of how I was able to sort of accelerate my job hunt. Whole other topic, but like big part of the story, really. So I'll take the approach on the other side of things of how I organized myself from an active job seeker approach because Sherpa actually, while I it touches on my network a little bit, it was something I actively pursued because I did see a job posting for it. So the
Mm.
way I broke it down, and I think the number one thing is to stay or get organized around your job hunt. If you're just going and like, you know what, easy apply, usually not ideal. But if you're just clicking a bunch of buttons and like you're applying to a bunch of things and you're not tracking what you're doing or where, I think that's problematic. So I started with a Google Sheet and I had three tabs at the bottom. My first tab was if I knew somebody and they had an open job and I was applying for it. The second tab was I knew people who were in hiring roles, but they didn't necessarily have an opening right now. And the third category was I don't really know anybody, but there are job openings and the company is interesting to me. In retrospect, what I probably would have done differently and what I would have done if I had less of a network was built out two lists of companies. One list of companies I want to work for, whether they're hiring or not. Like, hey, this is my dream top 10 list of companies I want to work for. My other list would have been companies that are hiring that I want to work for. So like that would have been kind of how I broke it down if I didn't have the network I did, because what I would do from there is that's my prospecting, right? This whole
Yes, sir.
job hunt was a sales process to me. It was a sales cycle. So I've got a job that I want to apply for at this company. I want to go on LinkedIn and figure out who might be the hiring manager. I want to find out, and you're not going to know for sure, right? You're going to guess.
Of
Might be a
course.
manager, might be a director, might be whatever. Going to go after them. Going to connect with them on LinkedIn. Going to try and use any resource that I had at my disposal. At the time, while I was still employed, I was able to sneak into Zoom Info and grab some phone numbers and some emails. After that, Apollo has a free extension that works really nicely. Not getting paid by them or anything, but I do think as a free resource, it's fantastic. So I would get people's emails, get people's phone numbers, and then I would cold call, cold email them as if I was trying to sell to them. Like that was the general gist of how I went about it was I want to work there. You're the hiring manager. Here's why you should hire me. And I think that not only differentiates yourself, but also puts yourself on top of their radar because applying for jobs is great, but man, I've posted a BDR role and gotten 600 applicants. I can't look at them all, like, it's not physically possible. So
Of
how do
course.
you end up getting yourself at the top of that list?
And so you literally did the job to get the job, which is a very like I coach that constantly. I see a lot of sales leaders doing the same thing on LinkedIn as well, which is like just do the damn thing the way you would if you were already in the role. Instead of going for their ICP, you're gonna treat them as your ICP, right? The hiring managers, which is exactly what you did. Like you literally created a list and started cold calling and cold emailing people, right?
Absolutely, and created a list, and then so I think that the beauty of sales, like I would recommend this for anybody in any industry looking for any type of job. Like you have to differentiate yourself, you have to find a way. The beauty of doing it in sales is one, hopefully you already have the skills, and two, you are showing your skills off while you're doing it. So it definitely has an added benefit in the sales world. Don't get me wrong. But it was that I would look at a company and go, great, how can I get their attention? And maybe it was a call, maybe it was an email, maybe it was LinkedIn, maybe it was a video, maybe it was a voice note, maybe it was a mix of all of them. So it was about finding a way to get somebody's attention. And it's the exact same thing as a sales process would be. So, I'd look at it and look at what are the requirements and how can I talk about my experience, how that translates, and tell that story when I call them or email them. And I think the one differentiator is if you're an SDR or BDR working in a world where like you're on a dialer and you're just slamming phone calls, like this isn't that. Like you're not doing that, right? I had my list. I had who am I reaching out to? I had a note section that said, here is where my experience is relevant to this specific company or this specific role. And for myself, a big thing that I was trying to do was a little bit of a pivot. I had spent almost 10 years leading full cycle sales teams. I had spent a couple years on the BDR side of things, and I kind of wanted to get back to that full cycle thing. So I literally had to not only sell myself, but explain that, hey, I know if you look at my profile, initially you're going to see the BDR thing, but like I have this other experience. Not all of it's in SaaS, but believe me, I can do the job. So it wasn't just selling myself and my history. It was also selling a bit of a pivot I wanted to make going forward.
Was it a challenge?
Oh, super challenging. I
Really?
I got a hold of people. I had people respond to me and like, "Oh, you don't have enough experience to do this." I was like, "I've literally led like multi-layer $1 million, like 15 plus $1 million sales orgs." And they're like, "Oh, you don't have the SaaS experience though."
Are you kidding me?
And I was like, I literally for 10 years outside of SaaS and then for 2 years in SaaS led full cycle sales teams. And I got a lot of pushback on that. And
Mm.
that was the most frustrating part is I was actually getting people responding to me. Not too many people picked up the phone. I got a lot of like LinkedIn and email responses though, and they're just like, "Yeah, I looked you up on LinkedIn and not hiring a BDR leader right now."
For fuck's sake.
It's not what I'm doing. Um, but it again, I'm typically a very positive person. So I looked at it and went, "All right, well, my messaging sucks then. Like I'm clearly not explaining myself properly. If the result of my outreach is them thinking they don't want to hire me, I'm missing something there."
Nice.
And, part of it was I went in and I tweaked my CV a little bit to make sure I was highlighting exactly what I was doing, where I was a sales leader, where I wasn't like a BDR leader and, trying to highlight some more of that. So I took it as a challenge, but lots and lots and lots of pushback.
But still, this is the perfect example of how to tailor your job search to what you're looking for. Like, I couldn't have asked for a better example because you have some quote, like quoted some experience in a certain area, and you needed to find a way to get a job in that area, and so you eventually did. I just love this whole track. Now, I'm really curious. What were your criteria, right? So how many meetings did you have, right? If you even, so you said you were keeping track. Do you know how many like meetings, what were your conversion numbers? Like, were you keeping track of all of that or just like positive interviews?
Um, I was keeping track of all of it, but I didn't really do the math for conversion rates. I'm sorry. I
That's
should have.
fine.
It's my bad SDR background, but I was looking. So the thing is, I did do an experiment at one point,
Hmm.
and I would just go and just straight up apply for jobs. And like I was doing it. This was almost more for LinkedIn content than it was for a job. But if I landed an interview, great. I was like, you know what? I'm just gonna go through. I spent a week just about. So I'm gonna apply for every job that looks anything like what I want.
Hmm.
And so I applied for like in a week about 65 jobs. Easy apply. I hit the easy apply button. I just went to their website, dumped my CV in. Nothing crazy. Like answered the questions that they had, but nothing optional. Like I did the bare minimum to see how that would work. 65, I got 2 interviews out of it, which is actually better than I expected, to
Yeah.
be fair. I expected to hear nothing. The wacky part is 65 of them. I got 2 interviews. I got about 5 rejection emails. Silence from everybody else. To this day, I haven't heard back, and I'm sure I'll get a rejection letter in like 6 months or something from some job I applied to 3 months ago, but that was what was wild to me and very eye-opening, and I shared that learning on LinkedIn that if you are just applying for a job, the worst part is you're not even gonna know if anybody looked at it. It's heartbreaking because you put effort in, and I made this whole joke about cover letters. I'm like, "I'm not gonna write a cover letter because I'm assuming you're not even gonna read my resume."
Um, I think this goes to the point that you made earlier about your BDR opening that you published for Sherpa
Mm,
and 600 applicants. Like, it's humanly impossible. Even if you had a huge HR team, for example, screening all those candidates, it's just so much effort that you have to put in, you or somebody else. Is it actually worth the time? And so I mean, I didn't know. I probably missed that LinkedIn post. I didn't know that you created that experiment, and that's really, really that's amazing because somebody with so much experience that, like yourself, you managed to get, 2 interviews out of 65. What can somebody without experience expect to achieve? Whatever the number of easy applies and, like, just blanket applying to everything they come across. So the process requires effort to make sure that you end up at the top of the pile rather than nondescript, right?
and the effort aspect of it is something that I think a lot of people don't fully grasp. And it's tough because I don't even think I did it first either. So when I got laid off or found out I was losing my job, I'm like, you know what? The timing isn't the worst timing in the world. I'm going to work till the end of November.
Mm.
I have a little bit of severance. So I have a bit of a cushion for December. The holidays are happening. I have a newborn at home. We'll have a lot of time during the holidays. We'll be able to enjoy things, maybe travel a little bit, go to a Christmas market. I don't know. We had so many great, um, thoughts and ideas and dreams of things we would do. And like, I'll land a job and I'll start in January. It'll be perfect. And then you get into it and like, sure, I was job hunting while I was kind of wrapping up at work. So that was fine. I was kind of doing my normal day to day 9 to 5 stuff. And that was fine. And then I remember the first week that I was unemployed. And then it was like, oh yeah, well, I have 3 calls today and I want to do some job applications. Then I'm working on building some little thing on the side for myself so I don't end up in a situation like this in the future. And all of a sudden I'm like, I'm busier than I was when I was fully employed because you're applying, you're taking the time to tweak CVs and things, and then you're calling people and emailing, and you're having coffee chats to network with people, and you're doing interviews and you're prepping for interviews. It becomes a full time job. And I think that I don't want to be that guy to say, if you're not spending 8 hours a day looking for a job, you're not doing yourself a service. But like, you need to understand that there's an aspect to it that will be hard and time consuming, and you need to find a balance, because the thing I learned in that first week, and I probably actually did it for 2 weeks, was like I was almost burning myself out looking for a job. Because when you're working and you're doing the job and you're getting your paycheck and everything's cool, sure, you can absolutely burn out. 100% totally possible. But when you're not employed and you are looking for a job and you have the added stress and pressure of, I am essentially doing this work for free in hopes that I will eventually get a job so I can eventually pay my bills, that is an extra level of stress and anxiety on you that takes its toll as well. So you can do the same amount of hours and feel so much worse at the end of the day. And I had this really weird dynamic in my mind where I'm thinking to myself, okay, every moment I spend working or looking for a job, I am not spending with my 6-month-old and my wife, who are literally upstairs. But at the same time, if I am spending all of my time with them and not looking for a job, how long before I can afford the mortgage on my house that we're all living in? So it's like this very strange dynamic that adds an extra burden and pressure to yourself when you are job hunting. So it's important to stay organized. It's important to dedicate hours to the job hunt, but it is important to not allow it to be all encompassing and all consuming because you will end up doing more harm than good to yourself.
I felt a roller coaster of emotions as you were talking, and because like I could literally put myself in that spot of like, on one hand, you want to spend the time with the family, you kind of feel like you have it, but on the other hand, you wouldn't be doing them and yourself a favor if you actually like indulge into that, opposed to I got work to do. I gotta make this thing work, which you eventually ended up doing. Really tough, and I'm repeating this. Maybe it's too much, but I want to emphasize like this is I can just see so many people feeling the same level of anxiety that you went through, and it's just so important to for them and everybody else to know that they're not alone. But here's another thing that I would like to for us to get into, which I think would be useful to a lot of people. I see, because I work with SDRs mostly, I see them not having criteria to like what they want, or at least what they don't want. What I've seen, only like top performing people who literally know exactly what they want to do in the next like 5, even 10 years, they are the ones that know like exactly what they want. But I don't usually see it with young folks. So I'm not saying you're old. So what did what did that look like for you? Like, what were your criteria, at least for what do you don't want?
So it's interesting you bring that up. And I think a big part of why folks who have a bit more experience, regardless of if they're old or not, but people who have a bit more experience, you know what? Forget it. I'm going to speak for myself.
Yes.
I had things I wanted to avoid because I have been burnt before. And I think that when you're a bit more junior and you haven't had as much work experience, you haven't necessarily, and you may have, like job number one might have been a complete nightmare, but you haven't necessarily been burnt yet. So you haven't put up that guard of, whoa, wait a second. I don't want to go back into that situation I was just in. So that was a big part of my search. Was I'd spent the last few years in roles at startups, and product market fit is a funny thing because people think they have it, but they realize that having it because people say that's really cool and you should do that, and having it because somebody says, I will pay money for that, are separate things. And I think that's something I got a bit caught up in, where the companies weren't proven in the way of the technology. They had something cool. When I'm interviewing with them, they're telling me about it. I'm like, that's neat. I totally see the use case for it. But will people spend money on it? And that's the challenge in sales, right? So I think for me, it was trying to find something that had a little bit more longevity behind it and a more of a product market fit in a perfect world. And I ended up finding that spot, but moving to a company that sells something that is a must have instead of a nice to have,
Hmm.
because I'd been in a nice to have world for the last little while. And that's, especially in a challenging market, those are the first things that get stripped out, right? So that was something that was important for me. Um, I started to learn that I didn't care about all these promises that are made to you, right? You're going through the hiring process. Hey, we have unlimited vacation. And then you read the fine print and it's like, well, you have 3 weeks of vacation. If you want more than that, like the friggin' board of directors has to sign off on it. So you're like, well, that's not actually unlimited, right? So like all those little things, I wanted to work somewhere where, I had a good feeling about the fact that, hey, these people actually care. Um, I wanted to have a spot where it was a technology that, again, was not ideally not a nice to have, but a must have, and something that had a little bit of legs behind it, that had some, history behind it, showing that, hey, people will spend money on this. This is good. And I wanted to work for somebody I could learn from, because I also found in the startup world, people wear so many hats that they're always distracted and they never actually spend a lot of time coaching other people. Like, that was my role when I'm coaching SDRs, right? That's literally my job. But as a manager, as a director, the further you get up the food chain, the less time people spend with you. You have to do a lot more of that yourself. So those were all things that were really important to me as I was going through interview processes. And I understand that it's not as black and white as I'd like it to be if I'm giving advice. It's a little bit more of like how I felt about it based on my experience of what I've seen. Something that I think SDRs should really leverage is rep view. You need to go look at rep view if you are hiring or if you're applying for companies that are currently there, because I think that, and rep view is not perfect, right? It's crowdsourced. So it's good. It's better than nothing. It's not perfect, especially as an SDR. Like, this is going to sound bad. And I don't even think it's intentionally malicious on a company side, but they paint these really pretty pictures for SDRs because you don't have a lot of experience. That's cool. I'll give you the training. I'll give you the development. I'm going to paint this beautiful picture of this sunny world that you're going to come into. We're going to train you. We're going to develop you. You're going to make a bunch of money. Everything's going to be great. And I do think that some sales leaders truly believe that. But if you go look at RepView, you realize very quickly that that's not the case because most people aren't hitting quota and most people aren't seeing the success that they are promised. So for me, if I was an SDR or even any individual contributor, an account executive, anything like that, I would be living on there to understand, do I truly have an opportunity at this company? Because that will tell you if there's product market fit. If 80% of people are hitting quota, people want to buy your product. Cool. That helps. If they are selling or hitting quota at a high number, and to be fair, high, if I'm looking at RepView, 60% plus, I think is something you should aim for. More than half the people are hitting quota. If it's 100%, that's probably a lie. So like I think 60% plus is a good spot to be in, but that gives you a lot of information about the company, how they treat their people, how they train their people, how they compensate their people, all of that. It feels a lot fairer. So if I'm an SDR, I'm an AE looking for a new job, like I'm living there to understand that.
So many things here. Let me quickly recap for the audience real quick. So
Yeah, sorry, I tend to
um,
go on rants like that and I just probably talked for like the last 12 minutes, but
I love that. That's fine. So, so the things that you were looking for in the opportunities that you were reviewing, it was one, a product market fit, and how you define it is basically not, hey, this is a cool thing, and you see a use case, but it's actually something that people are willing to give their money for, right? So that's number one. Number two is not really getting what's the word, like getting romanticized by these perks and nice things and benefits that you might be hearing throughout the hiring process. It doesn't really matter. And then the third thing is actually, are these companies successful in what they're doing? What you can easily find, at least for the US market. I know it's I think it's the best resource out there, which is RepView, where you basically go there. It's like Glassdoor for sales roles, right? For tech
mhm.
sales, basically, where you learn about whether the company, like how many people are hitting quota and stuff like that. I follow them, and I've actually seen a lot of people post about them. I don't know if it's paid or not, but it's really doing a good job.
Yeah, I don't know if it's paid or not either, but it's absolutely a resource you should check out. Yeah, it might
100%.
be more North America centric, but it gives you a lot of great information.
No, 100%, 100%. I use it myself. It's a good indicator of, like, I don't know. I used to sell to sales leaders, so it's a good indicator of, like, what's going on. You can use that to even personalize stuff. And again, speaking of reaching out to hiring managers, you can use RepView to personalize your outreach to these hiring managers. So
Very cool.
um, there we go. Were there any specific companies or opportunities that you were reviewing, but you were like, oh, no, 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 here's a red flag, I recognize it, I'm not going to go this way?
That one's tough because it was so case by case.
Mm.
I said no to probably about 3 or 4 offers. Sometimes it was compensation, sometimes it was work location, like I right now I'm working in a hybrid role. I go into the office like twice a week. I like that. I have no issue with that. If you tell me I need to be in the office 5 days a week, I'm going to pass. Um so it was really logistics things more than anything else because I never got that far in the process with a company that didn't sort of fit some of that criteria I was talking about. If somebody reached out and said that, they're selling this fun widget thing that people might like, I probably didn't get very far. I might have humored them with the conversation. Like, I paint this picture as if I had this very holistic view of I know exactly what I want and I had a okay financial cushion and I'm not going to just jump into anything. But like when you're looking for a job, I'll talk to just about anybody once, right? So that was sort of my logic is like, you know what? I'm cautiously optimistic here. Let me have a conversation and see. And more often than not, if they can't properly express exactly who the ICP is and exactly what the use case is and exactly what their pricing model is and exactly how many of their reps are hitting quota or what their quota is or what their growth goals are, like I'm a little bit hesitant to continue the process there. So that's kind of where I would say no is just I you used romanticizing really nicely because that's exactly what it is, right? Let me paint this pretty picture about benefits and advantages over here, to take you away from what the actual job is. So, like, cool, that stuff's all great, and it's really important. And for anybody in the U.S. listening to this, I know that like benefits is probably on the top of your list from healthcare perspective, but I think it's just important to focus back on these are cool things. Talk to me about the job. Talk to me about the requirements. Talk to me about the expectations. Talk to me about the goals. Give me things that you should factually know, black and white. If I'm talking to a sales leader and they don't know what their target is for the year, I'm really scared.
Oh yeah, that's super scary. That's like a huge red flag. So what did Sherpa do differently? What did really attract you there? I'm really curious.
Oh my gosh. So it's a really funny story. I'll tell it in snippets. So I had met so Sherpa does apps and web platforms for events,
Hmm.
but mainly in person or hybrid events. They don't do anything just virtual. Now, the first thing that I really liked about it was the company's actually been around for 10 years. What I found out after meeting with the founder is he's actually been in the event space for like 30 years. He used to do hardware where, scanning badges wasn't a cell phone thing because people didn't have smartphones. It was an actual machine and all that. Like he had done all that, had a previous company, decided everybody's got a smartphone now, we're going to do apps. But he had done it for, since the early 2010s. So I was like, okay, longevity is there. Cool. People are buying the product. They're at X amount of dollars of sales. It's a must have. Any event now that's at the size that we target, which is about 5,000 attendees plus, you have to have an app, no choice. So cool. Okay. Checking some boxes. I actually originally met with Jacques, the founder, in March of 2020. And for anybody who forgets what happened in March of 2020, there's this little pandemic thing where people weren't allowed to get together. So from an event perspective, they weren't happening. So we had a chat in 2020 and then ended up saying like, maybe it's not the best time. Let's reconnect when things are a little bit more clear, right? Because we didn't know pandemic's going to be 5 minutes or 5 years. We weren't sure. So we'll reconnect later on if it makes sense. We sort of lost touch to be entirely fair until I saw a job posting come up. And it was for director of business development and sales at Sherpa. And I was like, oh, yeah, sure. But I remember that. I'm going back in my emails. I search it up. I'm like, yeah, I met with Jacques. Cool. Let me send Jacques a note. So I send Jacques a note and I'm like, hey, Jacques, we met, 3 years ago, 4 years ago, whatever it is at the time, chatting about this and this. I'd love to connect about the role. Best response ever. I don't remember you, but if it was worth talking to you back then, it's probably worth talking to you now. Let's chat. So that's why I laugh about the fact that the network sort of helped because I did meet with the dude and it did allow me to have a reason to reach out. But he was like, sure, I guess. It's like this weird roundabout way where like, yeah, networking helped, but it didn't get me the job by any means. Um, so the big thing around like knowing that this person cares was when I chatted with him about it, and he had done a lot of like founder led sales essentially for up until the pandemic. Every now and again, he would hire an AE or like a BDR or somebody to help with some of the administrative side of things, coordinating and all that. And then pandemic happened, and he basically said like, look, throughout the entire pandemic, the 2-ish years where we had zero revenue, I did not lay a single person off. Not a big company, 30 some odd people, but paying their salaries for 2 years with $0 of revenue shows the type of person he is.
Exactly. That's not something you see every day.
No. He's like, "Look, I had them spend 2 years building and improving our product, and here are the offerings we now have, and here's why we're ahead of the market because the rest of the market spent 2 years building virtual platforms." Right? So people could do virtual stuff. And he's like, "Look, we're gonna come out of this and nobody's gonna wanna do a virtual webinar ever again." And sure enough, that's where we're at, where everybody we talk to, all the prospects we talk to now go, I don't want to talk about virtual ever again. Like, let's go back to in person. Let's do what we loved doing previously. So again, the product was there. Obviously, this person cared and, really did want to build something in the way of like a team and a culture. And that's what he said. He's like, look, I'm coming out of the pandemic. Obviously, I spent a lot of my reserves on paying people salary. Like, I need to accelerate this growth. I can't just do it all by myself anymore. I really need to build a team to go to help me sell so we can kind of dig out of this hole that we kind of fell into during the pandemic. So that was great. Um, to add another wrinkle to this hilarious story. So I had my first meeting with him and we had a good chat and he's like giving me backstory. And I mean, he had just kind of come out of the pandemic and was still hurting a little bit. So that first initial conversation was actually quite negative on his part. Not negative in like our interaction, but he was
Mm.
just talking a lot about like the challenges and how hard it was and how difficult it was. And I'm like, I'm sure it is, but I also just spent the last half an hour listening to you complain. So like, I don't really want to work for you. Which I thought was hilarious. So, I after that first interview, he sends me an email. It's like, "Hey, I'd love to meet with you again, like talk next steps." And I was like, "Yeah, I'm gonna pass." And he writes me back like, "No, no, no, Chris. Like we had a good conversation. Like I think you're the man for the job. What can I do to turn this around? I realize been a bit negative, but I've had a rough go at it, and I really want to make this positive." And he's like, "What can I do?" I'm like, "Well, look, I'll have coffee with you." But you're coming to me. Like we live on opposite sides of the island. Montreal's not that big a city, but I'm like, you're coming to me. There's this coffee shop down the street from my house. I will meet you there. We'll have coffee. We'll talk. He's like, yep, sure, no problem. Tell me when, tell me where. I'll be there. And he drove down. We had coffee. Apologized for his general negative behavior. He's like, let's have a proper conversation about what we can do together and what we can achieve. And at that point, again, going back to that, I'm like, okay, this dude like has a plan, feels good about it, will go out of his way to make things work.
Has shown
And
humility, and
yeah,
and accepted and like admitted to, like, being at fault or whatever. So ego in check. That's, at least for me, that's a super important thing.
not every founder has that. I've
Yeah.
worked for a lot of them. Not all of them have that.
Exactly.
So yeah, we had the coffee chat. He kind of mapped out his goals and things of what he wants to achieve revenue wise. He had like the next 5 years planned out. Numbers. He's like, there's a lot of gaps in how we get there, but
Mm.
like we have the product, we have the relationships, we have all of this. So we had that conversation. He's like, look, if you're still interested after this conversation, come to the office. Meet me at the office. I'm going to print up your offer. We'll go through your offer together. We'll build out your comp plan together. We'll do all of that together. So it makes sense for you, makes sense for me. And it'd be win-win. I was like, well, that solves a lot of my concerns about making up a comp plan that's not achievable and all that. So um, because I asked him, like, "What's the comp plan?" He's like, "Well, I haven't really had anybody in the role that's been able to like has been like you, so let's figure it out together, and then we'll have that trickle down, and then we'll figure out how we're gonna have the AEs you hire be successful." And that's sort of I kind of liked his strategy, and I've sort of paid that forward to, we're doing interviews now for account executives, and somebody asked me like, "Okay, what's the comp structure look like?" I was like, "Well, look, I want it to make sense for you and I want the company to make money. So how much what do you want your OTE to be? And then we'll work backwards as to what you need to do to achieve that. And if you're like, that looks really hard, well, maybe your OTE shouldn't have been 500K. So, I think there's a lot when you're building something, building it together, I think makes a really big difference. And having people be able to like feel like they're a part of it as opposed to just being dictated to really helps that buy-in aspect of it to make them feel like, hey, I'm part of this now, not just I'm, a number on a spreadsheet somewhere.
I love that. I actually would would love to meet your your CEO, and because like the dude obviously knows, like, he hired somebody who's gonna help him figure those things out, right? So he wasn't like, oh, this is gonna be the OT, these are the targets, deal with it, right? Which is usually how things happen, even with sales leaders. Like, they don't really have a benchmark off of what their quotas are. And so, I mean, not everybody, but like it happens, and then you get unsuccessful and unhappy sales teams. We're reaching the end soon. We got to start wrapping up. Like, I wanted to ask you a gazillion more things. We got to do this again. Um, but like I love this story from the founder. Seems like a really cool guy. I can understand why you eventually ended up going there. So one of the first things that I at least saw that you did was to hire a BDR. Like
Mhm.
what was your like checklist? What were the first things that you did, and were you able to hire that as the BDR eventually?
So we have there's one account executive in the role now, and we were looking at it going, okay, could hire another account executive, could hire a BDR. Well, we weren't sure what we wanted to do. And so my logic comes back to, all right, what do we need? Like we need pipeline.
That's
We
right.
didn't have like, we had one AE in place kind of doing some stuff, but we needed to accelerate pipelines. Like, well, let's get a BDR, but the goal is going to be to build pipeline so that they can then move into an AE role to manage that pipeline because, the founder, the goal is for him to take spend less and less time in sales. He's a technical guy anyway, so he'll probably always be sort of the doing the demos, being the sales engineer side of things, but having actual AEs run the process. So we came back to like, let's hire a BDR. And I want BDRs to be successful more than anything else in the world. Like I said, I was given that opportunity one day and I want to pay that forward. So I can't hire a junior BDR because I don't have onboarding. I don't have tools to give them. I don't have a lot of the things that, a company that should hire a junior BDR should have. So my logic was like, I can teach you the product right now, but I can't give you 0 to a 100 of exactly what you need to do. Like, I don't have the time for that. We don't have the time for that as a company, right? It's all about cash flow. It's a startup. Like, how do we grow this thing? So, I was looking for somebody a bit more senior, and I've actually met a couple folks who have come back to me, and they've got almost more of an AE profile, and they're like, "Yeah, I'll come in and do BDR work for 6 months if you're gonna promote me after that." Like, I'm in. I'm down to roll up my sleeves and help build the business. And for me, like, that means the world to me because, like, you're gonna come in and do the thing and contribute, and, like, you wanna be part of the success, and, like, that for me is what I'm looking for. So I think that, again, if you've got, like, SDRs looking for jobs and they're listening to this, I think that that is something else you should add to that sort of profile of where you're looking to go. If
Mm,
you're junior, straight out of school, 0 experience, like I was, like, studying kinesiology, I had never taken a business course in my life. I got a job at Aerotech. It was like a $10 billion company. Why? Because my onboarding was very prescriptive and very all encompassing. It was like 3 weeks of modules and role playing and all that. So if you're at like 0 and you really want a great foundation, like, I know it's easier said than done. Go get a job at Salesforce. Go get a job at Amazon. Go get a job at a big company that'll have structured onboarding. Spend a year there, then go somewhere else. But if you're straight out of school and starting from 0 and you want to like work for a small startup and you think that that's going to be the way to go, you might be able to. Don't get me wrong, but it is going to be a challenge because they will not have the resources to dedicate you to you that a larger company would have.
Amazing advice. I think we can wrap it here before I let you go. Is there anything that you would like to plug? Because that's something that we always ask our guests to
I'm To be fair, like, not really.
follow.
I've
Follow Chris.
exactly. That's literally it. And I keep telling myself like I should find a way to monetize this like LinkedIn platform that I got because a bunch of people follow me. But you know what? Honestly, I still want to continue to pay it forward. Come find me on LinkedIn. I post about I don't wanna say that I post about any category specifically. I post about getting hired, I post about sales, I post about whatever random stuff comes to mind. But, connect with me. Don't even follow me. Connect with me specifically. Happy to answer messages or questions or anything you have them. I have a free LinkedIn starter guide on my profile. Um, Literally, it's just free. I'm not selling you anything. Just download it, use it, and hopefully it helps. If it does, let me know. If it doesn't, and you think it sucks, let me know. I am a Sendfluencer, so I work with Sendoso to help them, push the value of direct gifting. So if your company is looking for a tool that will facilitate sending gift cards and all kinds of really cool stuff, like actual real stuff. I hate sending gift cards, but you can come talk to me about that too. I will happily set you up with somebody at Sendoso to explore that. So there, I do have something to push, not just come hang out with me on LinkedIn.
I love it. I love it. Chris, this was a huge pleasure. I really appreciate you for sharing your story. You're amazing as always, guys. Let us know in the comments what you feel about Chris, what you feel about the story that he shared. Did you find something interesting in it? And yeah, I really hope this is going to help a lot of people go through those tough times when they're job hunting.
I appreciate you having me so much. It is always a blast. I will come back anytime. Anytime a guest cancels on you or something, let me know. I will be here. I'll ramble about whatever topic you want to talk about.
Hell yeah, brother. Thank you very much.